When an avoidant looks away first, most people think it's rejection. They think it's disinterest, disrespect, or a cold heart shutting down. But what if I told you that moment, right there, that tiny shift of their eyes, is actually the doorway into their deepest truth? What if the very thing that hurts you is the same thing that protects them? Listen closely, because when an avoidant looks away, they're not running from you. They're running from the intensity inside them. And the real question isn't, why did they look away? The real question is, what are they fighting within themselves that you can't see? If you've ever loved someone who withdraws, shuts down, or pulls back the second things feel real, then today, you're about to understand the moment that changes everything. Avoidants don't look away because they don't care. They look away because they feel too much. On the surface, it might appear as disinterest, but internally they're dealing with emotional currents that hit them with more force than they can express. When someone with an avoidant attachment style shifts their gaze away, it's not a dismissal of the connection, it's their attempt to regulate an emotional wave surging inside them. They have learned from a very young age that showing vulnerability can be dangerous, so the safest thing they know how to do is disconnect. Their facial expression, avert their eyes, and create internal distance. This isn't apathy, it's emotional overwhelm disguised as control. They aren't shutting you out because you don't matter. They're shutting down because you matter more than they can manage in the moment. Their nervous system interprets closeness as intensity and intensity as threat. When emotions rise, they instinctively rely on learned behaviors, shift away, look down, appear calm, retreat inside. They think this protects both of you because they believe their true emotions, raw and unfiltered, might be too much. There is a force inside them that constantly whispers that closeness equals loss of self, loss of stability, or loss of control. So when they look away, they're actually grounding themselves, trying not to drown in the emotional pull they feel toward you. Many avoidants have a history of feeling unseen, unheard, or emotionally neglected. They learned early that the safest way to survive was to turn inward. Their emotional world became a private sanctuary where no one could judge them, abandon them, or overwhelm them. So when they look at you and feel intensity, whether love, fear, guilt, admiration, or longing, they immediately retreat. Not because you're unworthy, but because the emotion is too heavy for the tools they currently possess. Imagine someone trying to hold a fragile piece of glass with hands shaking from fear. The glass isn't the problem. The shaking isn't the problem. The problem is that they never learned how to hold something delicate without fear of breaking it. Avoidants are built from experiences that taught them how to survive, not how to express. They feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than securely attached people, but they don't trust the world with that depth. So the moment they look away is the moment their heart says, I feel too much, I need space to breathe. But here's the truth that most people never see. The fact that they look away means you touch something real inside them. You awaken something that scares them, not because it's wrong, but because it's powerful. They aren't running from you, they're running from what you make them feel. And that, more than anything, proves that the feeling is real. They distance because their emotions are strong, not because they're weak. And the moment you understand this, you stop taking it personally and start seeing the truth. The more they look away, the more they care. Their avoidance is a shield built to survive past emotional wounds. Avoidants are not born avoiding. They are shaped by experiences that taught them emotional closeness can be unpredictable, overwhelming, or unsafe. When they look away, pull back, or shut down, they are not making a conscious decision to reject connection. They are activating survival strategies built over years of emotional training. Their nervous system has been wired to believe that distance equals protection and closeness equals vulnerability. Every avoidant carries a story no one sees. It may be a childhood where their emotions were minimized, ignored, or punished, or a family environment where independence was valued more than intimacy. Some grew up with caregivers who were physically present but emotionally absent. Others experienced relationships where expressing needs led to disappointment or shame. Over time, they learned a painful lesson. If I don't depend on anyone, I can't be hurt. This becomes the foundation of their avoidance. It's not coldness, it's armor. They crafted defenses not out of ego, but out of necessity. So when they look away first, it's not because they don't value you. It's because closeness activates old emotional wounds that tell them they must protect themselves. Their avoidance is a language of fear, not rejection. Each time they create space, they're not saying, I don't want you. They're saying, I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling. Their shield forms automatically like a reflex, and once in place, it becomes incredibly difficult for them to break through it alone. Avoidants long for connection just like anyone else, but they fear the emotional exposure that comes with intimacy. Inside them is a constant conflict, the desire to be close battling with the instinct to retreat. When you get close enough to touch their heart, their shield rises not because you are a threat, but because their past taught them that vulnerability leads to pain. Even when they deeply care, they might respond with silence, distance, or looking away because those actions feel safer than allowing their emotions to spill out uncontrolled. They fear being misunderstood, judged, or emotionally trapped. They fear losing independence. They fear needing someone more than that person needs them. These fears are old ghosts whispering to them, activated whenever someone gets too close. But the shield they built was designed to protect them as children, not to help them thrive as adults. This means their strategies, while once necessary, now limit the very connection they crave. Understanding their avoidance as a shield softens your perception. It helps you see that their behavior is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their wounds. And when you recognize the shield for what it truly is, you begin to understand that their avoidance isn't about escaping you, it's about escaping the feelings they're terrified to face. Distance is their instinctive attempt to protect connection, not destroy it. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about avoidance. When an avoidant pulls back, creates silence, or turns their gaze away, most people assume they're pulling away from the relationship. But in reality, they're pulling away from the intensity that threatens their internal balance. To them, distance feels like a way to preserve the bond, not break it. Their mind equates closeness with potential loss, and loss with emotional chaos. So when their feelings deepen, their first reaction isn't to move closer, it's to create space. This space isn't an escape from the person they care about. It's their way of ensuring they don't become so overwhelmed that they shut down completely. Avoidants step back because they fear that if they stay too close without regulating themselves, they might say something they can't take back, react in a way they regret, or reveal vulnerability they believe will make them unsafe. In their world, distance becomes a form of emotional self-preservation. It's their way of saying, I care about this enough to not let my panic destroy it. And this is where the paradox lies. The more they care, the more they retreat. People expect love to pull someone closer, but for avoidance, love exposes the very parts of themselves they've spent years trying to protect. They're not used to emotional transparency. They're not accustomed to someone seeing them fully. So when they feel seen, truly seen, they instinctively pull away to breathe. To them, space equals survival of the connection. Without it, they fear becoming overwhelmed to the point of shutting down emotionally, which is far more damaging to a relationship than temporary distance. Think of it like emotional shock absorbers. The pullback is meant to soften the impact of closeness, not reject it. They need time to reorganize their internal world, to process the intensity that others might process naturally. They don't step back because they're drifting away. They step back because the connection means something significant. The deeper the feeling, the stronger the impulse to retreat briefly. They believe that stepping away protects both people. Their logic is simple. If I manage my emotions privately, I'm less likely to damage the bond publicly. Many avoidants genuinely believe that creating space is healthy, even necessary for intimacy. They are not trying to punish or confuse their partner. They're trying to steady themselves. But to someone who doesn't understand this internal process, their distance feels like abandonment. This is where relationships break, not because of the avoidance intention, but because of the misunderstanding around their behavior. Their retreat is not the closing of a door, it's the pausing of a moment. They expect you to remain steady while they recalibrate. They aren't running from connection, they're running from emotional overload, and that distinction changes everything. When avoidants feel the world closing in on them emotionally, they escape not out of selfishness, but out of fear that staying might intensify the emotions beyond what they can regulate. They believe distance will keep the connection alive while they regain their footing. When you understand this, their silence no longer feels like rejection. It feels like caution. Their space no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like self-regulation. And the moment you begin to see distance as their way of protecting the bond, you stop feeling unloved and start seeing the truth. Behind their retreat, they step back because they don't want to lose you. Your reaction to their withdrawal can either trigger their fear or calm their nervous system. When an avoidant pulls back, the moment becomes a crossroads. What you do next can either confirm their deepest fears or help them slowly unlearn them. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional pressure, even if they look calm on the surface. Their nervous system is wired to retreat when they sense intensity, conflict, or emotional demand. So when they step back and you react with panic, chasing, demanding answers, or pressuring them to talk before they're ready, it activates their internal alarm system. Suddenly, every old fear wakes up. Fear of being overwhelmed, fear of being controlled, fear of losing their autonomy, fear of being emotionally trapped. This makes them withdraw even deeper, not out of spite, but because their mind is telling them that closeness is unsafe. On the other hand, when you respond with steadiness, patience, and emotional neutrality, their nervous system begins to settle. You become a signal of safety instead of threat. They start to realize that being close to you doesn't mean giving up their freedom or being consumed by emotional demands. Your calm presence shows them that connection and independence can coexist. Avoidants don't need someone to pull them out of their retreat. They need someone who won't punish them for needing space. When they feel judged, criticized, or pressured to just talk, their instinct is to shut down. But when they feel respected, accepted, and not suffocated by emotion, they begin to edge closer on their own. The way you react shapes their entire emotional experience. If you respond with anger or accusation, their mind interprets it as danger. If you respond with insecurity or chasing, they interpret it as emotional chaos. But if you respond with grounded energy, they begin to feel something they rarely experience: emotional safety. Emotional safety is the one thing avoidants crave but don't know how to request. They fear it, yet they also long for it. They avoid vulnerability but desperately want to feel understood, and your reaction becomes the key that unlocks this possibility. When you remain stable during their withdrawal, you teach them that emotional moments don't lead to conflict or abandonment. You show them that they don't have to hide or defend themselves to stay connected. This slowly rewires their attachment system. It creates new emotional patterns that replace old survival instincts. The way you hold yourself during their retreat becomes a mirror that reflects the kind of relationship they could actually thrive in. Avoidants often carry an internal script that says, if I show emotion, I'll be misunderstood or overwhelmed. Your calm response begins rewriting that script. It teaches them that the world is not as dangerous as their past made them believe. Even silence feels safer when you aren't punishing them for it. Your reaction doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be steady. Avoidants watch your energy more than your words. If your posture, tone, and presence remain soft instead of reactive, they slowly begin to trust the connection. This trust builds in small moments, not grand gestures. It forms in every instance. You don't rush them, don't corner them, don't demand from them. It grows every time you give them space without resentment, closeness without pressure, understanding without panic. Over time, your reaction teaches them that connection doesn't have to feel like a trap. That love doesn't have to feel like emotional drowning. That distance doesn't mean disconnection. Your steadiness becomes the calm that quiets their fear. Your patience becomes the signal their nervous system has been waiting for, and eventually they begin to return not because they're forced to, but because they feel safe enough to choose it. Avoidants begin to open up when they feel emotionally safe, not pressured. Emotional safety is the key that unlocks their guarded heart. Yet it's the one thing they rarely experience in relationships. People often try to pull avoidants closer by asking more questions, demanding clarity, or forcing conversations in moments of tension. But pressure only makes their walls rise higher. The avoidant mind interprets emotional intensity as a threat, not because they don't want closeness, but they start to believe they won't be rejected for their hesitations. That belief becomes the first crack in their armor. Avoidants don't open through confrontation, they open through consistency. They need repeated experiences of being seen without being pushed. When someone shows them that their pace is acceptable, their nervous system begins to relax. Relaxation for them is not a small thing. It's monumental. It's the moment they start to feel that closeness doesn't equal loss of control. The irony is that avoidants often feel more than they show. Behind their calm expression and logical demeanor is a world of intense emotion. But they've learned to suppress it because they fear their feelings will be mishandled or misunderstood. Emotional safety gives them permission to slowly let those suppressed feelings rise to the surface. Safety shows them there won't be consequences for revealing pieces of themselves. And when they feel safe enough to share even a little, Perhaps a story from childhood, a vulnerable thought, a fear they've never admitted. It's a sign that the walls are softening. Every avoidant tests the emotional environment before opening up. They watch how you respond to silence. They notice whether you get frustrated when they need space. They pay attention to your tone when you ask emotional questions. They observe whether you take things personally when they shut down. Your consistency becomes the data they use to decide whether it's safe to reveal more. When someone reacts with calmness and understanding, the avoidant slowly learns that vulnerability doesn't automatically lead to conflict or chaos. This gradual trust building allows them to risk showing emotion, and once they feel they can show emotion without being judged, they begin to reveal layers they've kept hidden for years. Avoidants express themselves best in environments where they don't feel pressured to perform emotionally. Their emotional language is subtle, and it comes in small, meaningful gestures, checking in quietly, sharing a story, giving thoughtful attention, coming closer without being asked. These gestures are not small for them. They are huge steps of courage. The moment they feel emotionally safe, they start leaning toward connection, not away from it. They begin trusting the bond, trusting the consistency, trusting that you won't weaponize their vulnerability. Emotional safety transforms avoidance from distant to present, from silent to expressive, from guarded to slowly open-hearted. It allows them to feel that closeness is not a battlefield but a refuge, and once that transformation begins, they don't just connect, they invest. They don't just communicate, they reveal. They don't just stay, they choose you with a depth they rarely show the world. Healing begins the moment both people understand the emotions behind the silence. Avoidants are not healed by pressure, confrontation, or trying to force them to just communicate. They heal when both sides finally see what the silence truly represents. Silence for an avoidant is not emptiness, it's protection. It's the language their wounds learned long before love entered the picture. But when two people begin to understand what lies beneath that silence, something shifts. Misinterpretation turns into empathy. Reactivity turns into patience. Fear turns into understanding. The avoidant begins to feel that their silence is not being taken as rejection, and the other person begins to realize that withdrawal isn't abandonment. It's a coping mechanism born from emotional overload. This mutual awareness becomes the first real step toward healing. It softens the emotional tension that keeps avoidants locked inside themselves. When someone finally sees their silence as a shield and not a weapon, the avoidant starts feeling less alone. Their defensive instinct weakens because they no longer feel the need to protect themselves from misunderstanding. Understanding their silence doesn't mean excusing hurtful behavior. It means interpreting their reactions correctly. In moments of withdrawal, instead of assuming they don't care, the other person begins to understand they're overwhelmed, and this is how they cope. That one shift removes the pressure that keeps the avoidant stuck in their shell. When avoidants sense they can take space without being punished, judged, or misunderstood, it creates emotional oxygen. They can breathe. They can think. They can feel without fear of drowning. This oxygen is crucial because it gives them room to process rather than panic. And when they can process without panic, their emotional responses become healthier, more regulated, and more connected. Equally important is the avoidant's understanding of the other person's emotions. Healing happens when avoidants start to see how their silence impacts someone who values closeness. They begin to understand that their retreat is not interpreted as "I need space," but often as "I'm losing you." This awareness helps them adjust, communicate more clearly, and slowly build bridges instead of walls. When both people finally see the emotional truth behind each other's reactions, the cycle of misunderstanding breaks. The partner stops chasing out of fear, and the avoidant stops retreating out of panic. Instead of escalating into conflict, the relationship begins to stabilize. This shared understanding becomes the foundation for growth. Avoidants learn that vulnerability won't destroy them, and partners learn that patience won't cost them connection. Healing becomes a collaboration rather than a confrontation. It becomes a space where both people learn the emotional language of each other. Slowly, silence becomes less threatening. Distance becomes less painful. Communication becomes less intimidating. And closeness begins to feel safer on both sides. Avoidants, when understood, begin to show parts of themselves they never revealed before. Their honesty deepens. Their emotional presence increases. Their withdrawal lessens because they no longer feel hunted by expectation. Likewise, the partner begins to trust the connection without needing constant reassurance. They stop fearing abandonment because they understand the internal struggle happening beneath the avoidance calm surface. Healing in this context is not a miracle moment. It's a transformation built from understanding. It's the point where silence is no longer a wall but a signal. It's when distance stops being a threat and becomes an invitation to slow down. When two people reach this level of emotional clarity, something profound happens. The avoidant no longer feels alone inside their defenses, and the partner no longer feels alone outside of them. And that moment, when both hearts finally understand the truth behind the silence, is the birth of real, lasting healing. When an avoidant looks away first, it feels like the beginning of distance, but in truth it's the beginning of understanding. If you choose to see deeper than the surface, everything you've learned in this journey reveals one undeniable truth. Avoidants do not pull away because of a lack of emotion, but because of the intensity of it. Their silence, their space, their hesitation, these are not signs of coldness. They are signs of someone trying to manage emotions that were once too heavy for them to hold. In every moment they look away, there is a heart fighting between fear and desire, between staying guarded and wanting to stay connected. And once you understand that their retreat is born from emotional overload, not emotional emptiness, compassion replaces confusion, love replaces insecurity, clarity replaces guesswork. This understanding becomes the bridge between two different emotional worlds. One person might crave closeness, the other might fear it, but both want the same thing, connection without pain. The key is seeing each other's reactions not as personal attacks but as personal histories. When an avoidant steps back, they are trying to protect themselves from emotional collapse. When their partner steps forward, they are trying to protect the relationship from emotional drifting. These two instincts often collide, but when understood, they begin to harmonize. The distance becomes less of a wall and more of a signal, a moment to pause, breathe, and return with more clarity and less fear. Over time, this understanding transforms the relationship dynamic. You no longer feel abandoned when they need space, because you now see that space is their way of stabilizing their emotions, not escaping the bond. And the avoidant no longer feels pressured or suffocated because they sense your steadiness instead of panic. This creates a new emotional rhythm where both sides feel safer, the avoidant to open up and the partner to trust the connection without chasing. Emotional safety replaces emotional fear. Patience replaces tension. Understanding replaces misinterpretation. And in that transformation, a new kind of intimacy emerges, grounded, calm, and real. Healing doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness. It requires the willingness to look beyond the initial reaction and see the emotion underneath. For avoidance, healing begins when they are no longer punished for their silence. For their partners, healing begins when they realize that their worth is not measured by the avoidant's immediate emotional availability. Both sides learn something essential. Connection is not built in moments of perfection, but through moments of understanding. When you both begin to see the emotional truth behind each reaction, the relationship becomes less about fear and more about growth, less about defending yourself and more about discovering each other. And ultimately, when an avoidant looks away first, it no longer becomes a moment that creates distance. It becomes a moment that deepens awareness, a moment that invites compassion instead of conflict, a moment that opens the door to a healthier kind of love, where both hearts feel seen instead of judged. This is where real healing begins. Not when you force closeness, but when you understand the silence. Not when you chase or retreat, but when you meet each other with patience. And in that meeting, something powerful happens. The avoidance starts to stay. The partner starts to trust. And together, they step into a connection that is no longer shaped by fear, but strengthened by understanding. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me today. Your willingness to understand, to look deeper, and to explore the silent spaces of the heart shows strength, compassion, and emotional maturity. May this message help you build healthier, calmer, and more secure connections, whether with an avoidant, with yourself, or with anyone you love. Remember, awareness is the doorway to transformation, and you've already stepped through it. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and continue growing into the strongest version of yourself. Goodbye for now.